What do Falcons do? We rise up. Welcome to Rise Up Reactions, the show we talk all things Falcons, NFL, Georgia sports, and in general, the sports news of the day. I'm your host, Dr. Lee Denning, the Golden Hard Doc, and a lifelong sports fan, coming back to you today with a quick overview of my thoughts on Terry Fontenot. And today I'm going to grade his first 3 years as an NFL GM. I've already spent time talking about our previous GM, Thomas Dimitroff, and the failures of his early and late tenure, the success of the middle part of his tenure, and how he kind of set us up for failure going into the first part of Terry Fontenot's years. But I kind of want to go a little bit more in depth on that and talk about it. I do think that context matters. So for context, we are now with Raheem Morris once again. But going into the 2021 season, he had been our interim head coach, had taken an 0-5 team and found some way to win 4 games out of the remaining 11 at that point in time. Went 4-7 as our head coach with a team that was pretty bad overall. And I say that because you need to understand that the contracts that Dimitroff had really put into place kneecapped us, especially given COVID. So, 2021 season was not the COVID year, but it was affected by COVID because the salary cap for the first time in years went down and not up. Salary cap for 2021 was $185 million. It had been projected to be closer to $210 million. And instead it ended up being further back. We just now, with the announcement of it being just over $250 million for the 2024 season, have kind of caught back up to the trajectory of where it was headed before. But again, to go in 2021 from $185 million cap to 2024 with over $250 million, that's a huge differential. That is a number of key signings that can happen now, especially given that the Falcons are looking like they're going to have, before cuts, over $40 million in free cap space going into this next season. But let's set this up. Let's talk about the draft with 2021, because I think this is easily the worst look for Terry Fontenot. So you had pick 4 overall with Kyle Pitts. You had Richie Grant with pick 40, round 2. You had Jalen Mayfield, pick 68. You had Darren Hall, pick 108. You had Drew Dahlman, 114, 148, Taquan Graham, 182, Ogundeji. You had 183, Avery Williams, and 187, Frank Darby. Now, I want to talk about those specifically here because I just wanted to go over what they each have done. Kyle Pitts had a great rookie season, being functionally the top receiving target after Calvin Ridley basically chooses to sit out after week 4 and then has the gambling issue in the offseason the following year. But Kyle Pitts was functionally our best wide receiver, and he ended up getting over 1,000 yards with Matt Ryan at the helm. This is Matt Ryan's last year. You had Richie Grant, who got thrown in to be a starter as a second rounder in 2021, and he really shouldn't have been. He needed time to sit and develop, and he never got that, and I would say he's become a liability as a result of it. Yes, he has a handful of interceptions every year, but he also allows a ton of big plays. Some of our losses this past season, can be attributed directly to him in the red zone, and even on some bigger plays where he got beat deep. So I think that can definitely be attributed to him. So I would say he's a liability, not a great safety, and somebody that we need to be looking to replace in the near future. Pick 68, third rounder, Jalen Mayfield, got cut this past season, was never good, started, same type of situation, got thrust into a starting position because of injuries and was not ready for the role and ended up getting cut as a result. He really didn't play the year before at all. You had Darren Hall, corner, cut. You have Drew Dahlman, a gem for a starter. He still has a little bit of work to do in the pass defense, but run blocking this past year, he was a top 5 run blocking center, and I think that's great for the identity we've tried to have for a couple of years. But if we get a pocket passer, I need him to be better in pass protection, but definitely a gem solid starter for us. Then you had Taquan Graham, got cut this past year. I think one of the most notable things for Taquan was not this past year, but the year before last, the forced fumble against the Chargers, and then his subsequent fumble back to the Chargers that basically cost us the game. We could have sealed it, and it ended up costing us. That's what I remember from him. He was turning into an okay guy by the end of the year, but he got hurt as well, so he just never really had a chance. Ogundeji, he's an outside linebacker. He fit the Dean Pease scheme. He did not fit the Ryan Nielsen scheme. He really didn't play last year. He was also on IR last year. You have Avery Williams, the running back. He's a likely cut this year. He was on IR all of last year. He's been a special teamer for his career. And Frank Darby, he did get cut. So this is a pretty bad overall draft class considering that Drew Dahlman, Richie Grant, and Kyle Pitts are the only ones remaining, and all of them have been, except for Drew Dahlman lately, have been underperforming. So I would honestly give this draft class a D because you did have Kyle Pitts, but you passed on a ton of talent. You passed on your Micah Parsons. You passed on Brian Burns. I think it was Brian Burns. No, sorry, J.C. Horn. You passed on J.C. Horn. You passed on Patrick Surtain, and you passed on Justin Fields when you did end up needing a quarterback a season later. Now, Justin Fields may end up in Atlanta. He may not. We don't know at the time of making this video, but you could have had him with that pick, and I think he made more sense than Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts was a luxury, and you really didn't have luxury available to you, especially given that there was $185 million cap, and the Falcons' dead cap hit for 2021 was $30 million. So basically 1/6 of our salary was going to pay players that didn't exist on the team, including Julio Jones. Let's talk about our free agent signings. There's really only two that I thought were worthwhile. Cordell Patterson, who ended up being our starting running back, and Eric Harris, who ended up being an okay safety. He wasn't great, but he did play safety for us and was a solid backup. But guys who didn't work out, you had Jonathan Bullard, you had Deron Harmon, you had Josh Andrews, you had Mike Davis, you had Markevius Mingo. None of those guys really worked out for us in the long run, and they were all really 1 or 2 year deals maximum. So it's hard to really judge the free agency here. You ended up losing, though, because you couldn't re-sign them, because some of them retired, you ended up losing some of the key contributors, including All-Pro center Alex Mack. You ended up losing Keanu Neal, who I know had not played great as safety, but was supposed to be a foundational piece for us and was part of that 2016-2017 run. As a rookie, you had Ricardo Allen, another safety, and again, that's a position that we have been needing to replenish for quite some time here. Obviously, with Richie Grant, that's why we ended up taking him, is because we didn't have a safety. You had Todd Gurley, who basically retired afterwards because he couldn't get a job. And again, I feel bad for Todd. He retired basically before the age of 30 because of severe arthritis, because of all the injuries that he sustained. Dynamic running back when he was healthy, but he just had an injury-riddled career. And then this is just to throw one out there because I like his content and I think he's he would be a great analyst. I really enjoy the dynamic that he has with Tom Grossi, and that's Kurt Benkert. We lost him as our, I guess he would have been a practice squad guy for us then. But Kurt Benkert's a guy who has had some success in spring league football and has been a journeyman for most teams. He's a solid analyst, and I think that he would be great in the booth one day if he doesn't end up returning to the field, and we'll see what happens with him. But that's 2021. Overall, 2021 for Terry Fontenot. The free agency, I have to give a D as well. So overall, I'm going to give a D to his first year. So not a great start for Terry, obviously. That's definitely not where you want to be. If I'm going to call a C being just average. So don't think a C is an awful thing. It's just average. But let's talk about, it wasn't an F because we got Cordell Patterson out of it, and we still have room for Pitts to potentially improve with a new coach who knows how to use him. I don't think it's all Pitts' fault, but I don't think that he's been the guy that we wanted to be. Let's jump into 2022. I think we do better here. So with the 2022 draft, let's start out with this. There was $208 million added to the salary cap. However, the Falcons, oh my God, this is the year that we lost Matt Ryan, that we were still paying Julio, we were paying Dante Fowler, and a ton of other dink and dunk salaries, to the point that we had $83.5 million of dead cap going into this season. That was 40% of our salary went to pay players that did not exist on our team anymore after the 2021 season. It's hard to win, and we found a way to get 7-10 a second year in a row out of this. I felt like this was our year that we probably should have been 2-15 or 3-14, and we somehow found a way to win. I had hope for Arthur Smith after this season. But let's talk about what we did in the draft. We got Drake London, number 8 overall. I still would have rather had Kyle Hamilton or Jordan Davis. That's just me. But and then maybe taking a guy like Pickens in the second. But that's just me. Let's just stick with what we did, though. We got Drake London, solid wide receiver when he's used appropriately. When he gets volume, he's great. If you don't feed him enough early in the game, if he only gets like 4 or 5 receptions in the game, you've done a poor job managing him. But really good wide receiver. I don't think he's elite, but I think he's very good and has the potential to be elite. Arnold Ebiketie, he's great in the 3-4 scheme when you give him a chance, but he is a sub-end guy. He is not a all 4 down starter. He's a guy that they've been rotating in. Could he be an all 4 down starter? Yes, I think he certainly could be. But we haven't seen enough of him, and he really didn't work well with Nielsen this past year because Nielsen did not run the 3-4 defense like Dean Pease did. He certainly was a guy that was meant to fit the Dean Pease defensive scheme. And we'll see. We're returning to a 3-4 this year with Jimmy Lake, so we'll see what ends up happening with him. Troy Anderson, picked 58 overall, second rounder. He was hurt this past year, had an underwhelming 2022 season, hurt most of this past year, but he was looking good in the first couple of games before he got hurt. And then you have pick 74, Desmond Ridder. We know how that worked out. It didn't. I didn't love the pick at the time, and I still don't love the pick. However, again, I will say this every single time. When we make the pick, they are now a player on our team. I am not rooting for them to fail. I want them to succeed, even if I would have done something different. So I wanted Ridder to succeed once he was on our team, but I didn't have much faith that he would. And again, he didn't do what he needed to do. All he needed to be was a game manager, and he ended up this past season not being. So very underwhelming performance. Looks like he's going to be a career backup. Pick 82, still in the third round, you had D'Angelo Malone, who really didn't have a role in 2023. He's more of a 3-4 guy. Again, we're trying to fit Dean Pease's scheme, and he really didn't have a role in Nielsen. Then you have what I think is the pick of the draft with Tyler Algier, who had over 1,000 yards his rookie season and did great this past year when he was used appropriately. And then after that, you had a couple of not so great picks. I'm going to say that Justin Schaefer and John Fitzpatrick, both Georgia guys, neither one have really seen significant playing time. I'm not sure either of them have actually touched the field, though John Fitzpatrick did make the 53-man roster at points this past season because of how many tight end schemes we were running, but really was not contributory at all. But then we're going to jump into the free agents, which I think we actually did better this year, and I'm going to throw in the fact that we were $85 million of dead cap money going into this season. We really could not pay a ton of people. But you ended up getting guys like Lorenzo Carter on the cheap, who had a role to play. Wasn't great, but had a role to play. Casey Hayward, who got hurt, but was looking okay before he got hurt. He got cut the next year as a result. Cordell Patterson re-signed. Again, a guy for a depth piece that we needed, but he's been aging, and now, I don't know what his future is. Isaiah Oliver, who is one of my personal favorite guys. I know he's had some issues from time to time, and he's no longer on the team as of this year. Or this past year. You had Rashaan Evans, who played a mediocre role in the middle linebacker position. I don't think he was great. I don't think he was bad. He was just meh. Then you had Brad Pinion, who we have as our punter now, and Elijah Wilkinson, who I hated to lose because he played a solid job at the left guard position for us, and he was very cheap. Guys who didn't work out at all, Eddie Goldman never played it down for us. Damian Williams, running back, didn't really play it down for us. Anthony Ferkser, not really contributory as a tight end. Auden Tate, not contributory as a wide receiver. And the big one, Marcus Mariota. What more is there to say? A guy who has zero accuracy beyond 15 yards downfield. I don't know what to say about him. He was looking okay in the beginning of the season, and then after week 8 just fell off a cliff and completely died. So overall, given the situation that we were in, and given that we did find some guys who contributed and found a way, some of them, to stay on the roster, I'm going to give us a B+ on this free agency just because of what we had to do and what we were dealing with. If you're looking purely at talent, it's like a C. But if you're looking at the situation, I'd say a B+ for what we had to deal with and for what they ended up producing. The draft, I'm going to give a solid B because you have a mix of guys that are contributing and guys who are not really contributing or who may not. The two biggest takeaways being Tyler Algier and Drake London. Arnold Ebiketie and Troy Anderson, they are to be determined, and it'll depend on what happens with the scheme this year. And then D'Angelo Malone, I don't know what we're going to do with him. He might end up being good. He might not. I could easily be persuaded to move this into a B plus, A minus if they perform in year 3 this coming year. So you had 22, 23, and now they'll have their 24 season. So overall, I would say a B in year 2. And then we get into year 3, which even though the record did not reflect it in 2023, I do think that this is where the money is for Terry Fontenot. So let's start out with the draft. We had number 8 overall. Again, we took Bijan Robinson. I would have rather had the guy take it after him. But again, they didn't ask me. I think it was a mistake, but it is what it is. So Bijan Robinson, solid player, was used very inappropriately by Arthur Smith, and I think that's one of the reasons that Arthur Smith is no longer the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Good luck, Pittsburgh. He's going to use your 3rd, 4th, and 5th stringers just as frequently as he uses your 1st stringer, so good luck with that. But number 8 overall, I don't have a problem with it. I just think that we didn't use him right. Pick 38, round 2, we traded up to draft Matthew Bergeron, who played relatively well at the left guard position. We needed a future left guard on the cheap, and we were able to get it. He did not look good every game this season, but he didn't look bad every game this season. He was significantly better than anything we ever got from Jalen Mayfield, and he played as well or better than Elijah Wilkinson most of the time. He was certainly better in the run game than he was in the passing game, as were most of our linemen this past year. But again, I think that he was solid overall. Then you had Zach Harrison, who was developing at the end of the year as an edge rusher, a guy that didn't see much of the field early, but towards the end, it felt like he was having a sack every game or every other game for about the midway point of the season on, and certainly was a presence on the field. I feel like he's figuring it out. We're going to have a very crowded outside linebacker room and edge room. Don't know what we're going to do with that, but again, I expect some cuts this year. D'Angelo Malone going back a year ago, I think he's probably one of the guys that may get cut, but we'll see. Then you had Clark Phillips III, who, again, we made a trade for Jeff Okudah, which I'm going to get into here in a minute, which I don't think was a bad trade for a 5th-round pick. He just didn't end up playing well. He had some early success, and then, again, sucked towards the end of the season. And Clark Phillips III did not get to play in the early part of the season and came alive at the end and looked great when he got a chance to come alive. I loved seeing him on the field. He was great as a run stopper. He plays well as an outside corner. If you try to put him in the slot, he's going to suck. So do not do that with him, and he's great. He played naturally as an outside corner when he was in college. I believe he was a Utah guy. But yeah, he's a solid corner as a 4th-round pick. And then you move on. We didn't have another pick until frickin' DeMarco Hellams, pick 224, who again came in and played great as a backup safety and really ended up starting over guys like Richie Grant, and I think Jalen Hawkins got cut, or I think he was still on the team this year. Yeah, I think Jalen Hawkins is going to get cut this year, but he played phenomenal this past year as a 7th-round rookie, and I could not be happier with him. The only guy who did not see time on the field and was on our practice squad was Javon Gwynn, who was taken 1 pick later at 225 out of South Carolina. I believe he is a guard. He might be a tackle. Either way, we really didn't have much need of him, but he didn't see much action. But a guy who we'll see, he might stay on the practice squad. He might get moved around. But overall, you had 5 guys who all contributed this year. That is an A in my book. I'm going to go ahead and say it's an A+ for this past draft, just because even though we didn't have a lot of picks, almost all but one 7th-round pick contributed in a significant way this past year. So he gets an A+ on this past draft. I'm very excited to see what he can do in this coming draft, and we'll see if we end up with another 2nd-rounder or if it's going to stay at a 3rd-rounder, depending on what happens with Calvin Ridley. Let's go to free agency. We had $230 million of a total cap to spend here. You had effectively $25 million of dead cap, which is nothing compared to 85. So I think they had about $90 million altogether, and you brought in some big names. This is also going to end up being an A to A+. You have Jesse Bates, who is an all-pro safety. You have David Onyemata, who when healthy was playing phenomenal as the nose tackle. You had Caden Ellis, who, again, I think had an up-and-down year, but played overall very well. He was not a liability most of the time. You had Calais Campbell, who we don't know what's going to happen with him. Don't know if he's retired. Don't know if he's going to come back. Don't know if he's going to sign with a different team to try and get a ring. But Calais Campbell got his 100th sack with our team and just looked great most of the year, even at 38 years old. Caleb McGarry, up and down guy, solid run blocker. I still don't love him as a pass blocker, but again, you re-sign him. You re-sign Chris Lindstrom, who's the best right guard in all of football right now. You sign Bud Dupree, who, again, a little bit of a mix. I would have rather seen Arnold Ebiketie in there from time to time, but not a bad player. And you get Jonnu Smith and Jeff Okudah by trading, both of which at different points in time played well for us. But I would say Jeff Okudah was more of a liability than anything. Your guys that didn't really work out all that well in free agency were Trey Flowers, who had to play corner 2 for a while because of injury and was not great at it. Scotty Miller, just because he didn't get used at wide receiver. Cornell Armstrong, you brought back. I never liked him, didn't think he was good. Mike Hughes did not play well, though I understand the signing as a former number 1 or first round draft pick. You had Taylor Heineke, who was just as bad as Ritter, and you had Mac Hollins, who again was hurt or didn't get the respect that he deserved from Arthur Smith. And the guys you lost in free agency were Elijah Wilkinson, Isaiah Oliver, Taquan Graham, and Olanome Zaccheaus. Not overall terrible, so I'm going to have to give an A overall to the free agency here. So when you add all of that together, you have a D year, which was marred by a bad draft and no ability to spend in free agency. You had a B year in B plus year, and then you had 2 A's last year. I'm going to overall say that we are sitting at about a B to B plus with Terry Fontenot as our general manager. That's my overall consensus of him. I don't know why people were calling for his head this past year. Arthur Smith was the problem with how he was managing the team and how he was running it. All Terry Fontenot can do is add talent, and I think he has done the best in a bad situation. I want to give him at least this year and probably another year or 2 to see what he can put on the field. And again, we're bringing Raheem Morris back. We've got a new coach, and Fontenot really was not involved with the hiring process if the reports are to be believed. So I don't think if it doesn't work out that it's going to fall on him either. As long as the talent keeps coming in, I don't have a problem with this. Coaching has to find a way to make the talent work, and they haven't done that under him so far. Again, it's only been Arthur Smith so far. We'll see how Raheem Morris and his staff does. Zach Robinson and Jimmy Lake I'm excited about. And then we retained our special teams coordinator, so I think we were fine on special teams. You're still going to have Younghoe Koo and Bradley Pinion. And then Liam McCullough is looking to get re-signed as well, though I certainly would have had friend of the channel Josh Harris from the LA Chargers. I would have loved to have had him continue to be a Falcon. But anyways, I digress. Thank you for watching, liking, sharing, and subscribing. Sorry for the longness of this video. It's one that I have some passion in, but one that's probably going to do poorly overall because long videos just don't do well. But again, thank you guys to over 200 of you who have subscribed. It means the world to me. I'm trying to grow this channel to 500 by the end of the 2024 season. We'll see if I can do that or not, but thank you, and as always, rise up.